je tiens à vous remercier d'avoir organisé cet événement si ambitieux. Ce n'est pas facile de rassembler autant de voix et de personnes ici en temps réel et différent pour réfléchir ou décrire ce qui s'est passé dans le domaine de l'attraction dans de nombreux pays de 100 continents. Merci également pour l'invitation. Je pense que la performance la plus importante est celle qui se réalise collectivement. Je suis donc très heureux de participer et d'avoir contribué de ma manière à cette précieuse action académique dynamique. Malheureusement, mon français est presque inexistant et je préfère donc faire la conférence en anglais qui me permette d'improviser et parler avec plus de flexibilité, puisque même sans être bon, mon anglais, au moins, il existe. Donc, avec votre permission alors, en espérant que cela ne gêne pas les Québécois, je change de langue. Well, the title of this speech is Disperse the Scene, a place of our action in Peru at the end of 20th century and what goes of the 21st. Then, the first observation is that in the political field between the end of the 20th century and the present time in Peru, there are fewer differences than disappointing similarities. All through the 21st century begins with the overthrow of the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori, who ruled throughout the 90s. His influences has permeated all areas of politics up to now, and despite the growing anti-Fujimorism, a large part of politicians and the country as a whole consider him a leader still. After Fujimorism is supported without Fujimori, with his ghost, or an imposition of an anti-Fujimorism that values his economic achievements, depreciating the persecution, the massacre, and neutralization of protests, and in some cases, also social dignity as a state policy. The eloquent sign of that Fujimorism inheritance has been the pardon at the end of this year was granted by an ex-president before renouncing his position for corruption cases. And the annulment of that pardon at the beginning of this month, putting still in the doubt the possibility that he will be effectively serve his sentences. Apart from the co-opting of powers and new networks of corruption, the economic opening that he's finally getting right of all the state enterprises in the line of the process of capitalist globalization. We can say that a considerable part of the art action produced during these 2 decades owes something to the existence of that degraded political Fujimorism. Many actions have been taking place in the heat of the protest, accompanying public demonstrations like marches and revolts against the impunity of the juridical order that has attempted against the life and the rights of many social groups and even society as a whole. I want to place here 2 images that I will make visible as a diptych. The images on the left was used by Eduardo Villanes on the invite of his solo exhibition in 1994 and entitled Gloria Evaporada, Evaporate Glory. In August of 1995, the following year for this show and within a demonstration in rejection of the law of amnesty that the state grants a week before 2 members of the group Colina, condemned by kidnapping, disappearance in massacre, Villanes distributes the intervenient boxes of corrugated cardboard manufactured by the brand Gloria evaporated milk, used for the packing of their product, inviting the protesters to cover their heads with them and then threw the boxes into the Congress Square. The action refers to the delivery in boxes of cardboard, some of which, ironically but not premeditatedly, belonged to that brand, of the mortal remains of a professor and 9 students of the Enrique Guzmán y Valle University, by the state to their relatives killed by an annihilation command, highlighting the unworthy treatment extended to the same corpses. Villanes substitutes with the marker the word milk for the word people, to emphasize that threat that looms over anyone in the modality in which that product is distributed. The evaporation as forced evacuation of life and bodies that before from being buried in clandestine graves, they were then executed and then incinerated. On July 28, 1996, Independence Day of Peru, Juan Javier Salazar, the other images, made his first actual sale in the public space. It involved a series of true pillows that reproduced the silhouette of the Peruvian map using animal print fabric, yaur, that in subsequent years has been manufactured in more portable or smaller formats. Taking advantage of the red light that organized the circulation at a crossroad with traffic lights in front of the then Museum of the Nation, today offices of the Ministry of Culture, the artist replicates the modalities in informal cell. I want to show some images that I forget when I was talking about Villanes. That is the demonstration walking people in direction to the Congress with boxes, in the heads, and this is the brand, the original brand he was using, and this is another image about the manifestation against the law of amnesty, and then come back to Juan Javier Salazar. Taking advantage of the red light that organized the circulation at a crossroad in traffic lights in front of the now Ministry of Culture, but in that moment the Museum of the Nation, the artist replicates the modalities of informal self-employment and ambulatory trade that occupy the urban space in Lima, covered with his false skin. The piece invokes a presence because its use, in principle, is harmless. The totemic animal becomes a domestic accessory for the room to which the artist attributes magical functions. It carries on the inside guayudo seed, which is from the Amazonian plant that has a red and black color. On the inside, red and black seed, color seed, and that indigenous ancestors used as an amulet, attributing with the powers of warding of evil spirits. The border of a northern jungle with Brazil, it represents in the piece as a profile of a sort of horse or horn in the limits down with Ecuador and Colombia, suggests an eye of that could be Iquitos, the largest city in the Peruvian jungle, and it prolongs to the Pacific coast like a back at the ends in a feline tail, with which means occupation more playfully than symbolically the territory of Chile. as a country that defeats Spain in the Pacific War at the end of the 19th century, occupying the capital for 2 years, more than 2 years, and leaving wounds with the most rancid national pride. That nevertheless get working up time and time again. It is a sympathetic piece making use of the ancestral-centered presumption and irony about the trauma to turn Peru into an object that tries to revert the indifference of its population, a portable country that anyone can take home or embrace, and in contrast up to the usual experience of the nation, take it literally in their hands. Since in 2002, commemorating the same date of national anniversary, Salazar has made the action in successive years, and on the same date, with the title of the Disperse, boarding buses or public transportation connecting the city of Lima north to south, seeking to distribute the object of an audience that is on the fringe of that art micro-world, and at the same time to disperse himself as an artist of the field that keeps his work exclusively in those circuits, workshops, white cubes, galleries, or museums. The first action is a legitimate denunciation. I'm talking now about this too. The first action, the Llanes, is a legitimate denunciation against the regime that seeks the impunity of the perpetrators who have killed civilians. The second looks at the strategies of the informal economy, daily or through illegalized, in ways of driving optimism amid widespread discouragement. Perhaps between these two tracks, between outrage over violence and massacre, or optimism almost deliriously sustained in a reality that does not offer aplomb, we weigh some paths taken by our action in the last 2 decades. And 1997 is a year of inflection that 3 years later materialized in the tale of Fujimori government, and coincides in addition with that opening of the local arts and a growing reception of personalities from the international art scene in the following years. The national government begins to crack, particularly since the middle of that year, when there were massive marches against it, accentuating a climate of persecution that failed to reduce the indignation that mobilized broad sectors of society and political opposition forces. The capital city of Lima began to receive the visit of artists, critics, and curators who arrived invited to a place that until then had been a province in the context of Latin American art, and contribute to its events such as the Ibero-American Biennial of Lima, which had its first edition between October and December that year. Attention to genres, which had its first edition between attention to genders such as installation or conceptual art seeming to return from the scene already forgotten to those from the 60s and 70s, erased by a boom in painting and sculpture which had attention for almost 2 decades. Buoyed attention with local art proposal and initiated substantial changes in the production of young creators who began to question the few art training centers immersed in modernism, looking for contemporary languages. The art action thus established its own turning point in the marking of its national first edition of the biennial. Elena Tejada Herrera, who is in the picture, breaks into the last session of critics who participate in thematic talks in the occasion of the event, held in the end of October that year in the interior courtyard of the Art Museum of Lima, conditioned as an auditorium. Tejada Herrera wore a suit that covered her entire body, including the head, except for the pubis and the buttocks, left intentionally exposed, made with fragments taken from the job search classification section published once a week in a local newspaper. With a sign of her back, the red "good-looking woman looking for employment," name of the action, and another of her stomach with the inscription "jobs in general," moved amongst the public, distributing copies of a manifesto that contained collected paragraphs from the text by Josué de Castro on the relation between hunger and overpopulation. And on the reverse, employment notices taken from tow section, which an image linked of the same action taken from the SI made shortly before in an experimental theater. After an unsuccessful attempt to be withdrawn by a security guard, he took a stand while in the panel the Cuban critic Lilian James, which interpolates the absence of Cuban critics in Waldemar Rasmussen Latin American art show, held 4 years earlier in MoMA, New York. While the speech continued, the artist moved behind the table. You can just go again. You can show fragments of this. Without sound is well, it's not good sound. While the speech continued, the artist moved behind the table, distributing the manifesto of the speakers and extending a small offering bag, similar to the one used for teaching in churches, bearing a dollar symbol. Then she walked on the side of the platform where, with a highlighter, she pretends to highlight some notices of her body and then repeatedly shouted, "They bring dollars," shortly before being led by a person out of the stand. The title of the proposal inscribed on her back highlighted the phrase that some companies publish frequently as accepted discrimination, both racist and sexist, request as a requirement for job selection processes. Its action does not seem directed, however, to the art market, which would be presumed by the context, but to the market itself. In the midst of the nation insertion of local art in a globally defined scene by a domain without parity of gender, the idea of openness as a form of cultural and economic external capital is able to boast as a production that has remained outside of that scene, also pointing out the poverty of precarization that has marked the course of creative work. This action of Elena Tejada is the turning point in this chronicle of 2 years. Its proposal managed to capture the attention of the press and the media of genders that had been wrongly considered absent from the artistic practices carried out until then in Peru. In October and November 1999, I'm going to put this. Just without sound. 1999, in parallel to the activation of an art circuit that attended the second edition of the biennial, and in front in an act of censorship to their participation already continued in that event, Emilio Esteban presented his action called Crisis, within a self-managed collective exhibition conditioning the space located a few streets from the main venue of the international event, the exhibition Emergencia Artística, the name of the exhibition, Artistic Emergency. Inside the exhibition, his action occupied a room painted in black, which could only be accessed by one person at a time. An overhead light was turning on, presenting the artist also dressed in black. He stood in the shade while a national flag waved in the air, standing at a viewer. He held an hand to his chest as one does when silently reciting the national anthem. With the audio coming from a disc, with the repeated in each entry in turn of someone to the action installation, with the song Sin Fe, Without Faith, a popular bolero by Bobby Capó in the voice of José Feliciano. The lyric, far from the lamenting disenchantment of the couple and directed in that context to the homeland or to the citizenship that contemplates, urge the viewer to maintain a sustained hope gap despite the continuous disappointment that seems to be directed to the political past, recent and remote. The artist scraped the wall, leaving a mark for each person who visited the action in cumulative mode, such as country days of the wall of a prison cell, registering the number of 102,035 attendance. The third and last edition of this biennial, let's back to the PowerPoint.
It's the last one on the next one.
And then this. The last edition, the third and last edition of this received the presence of the Belgian Mexican artist Francis Alice. I think it's a very novel action. Under the curatorship of Cuauhtémoc Medina, deployed his proposal in a video installation of the central space of the Desamparados station, one of the venues of the event in the center of Lima, a way of radiating within the space of the biennial the experience of an action carried out the days before, April 2002, in the limits of the city, entitled When the Faith Moved Mountains. It was the displacement almost infinitesimal of a dune of about 500 meters in diameter, with the help of a few hundred people called for his proposal, in the proximity of a human statement of migrants slaughtered in the capital. Even its effectively minuscule scale, maximum effort, minimum results, was the slogan. The action constitutes a powerful symbolic operator that drives a greater expectation of or concern for the active transformation of the real. The sensitive moment of combing superficially the sound as a subtle but indicative act of setting course of deliberate meaning that, like the communitarian expansion of the city, responds to social commitment and do not leave everything to the whim of the wine. However, other realities have consolidated completely different ways in which macroeconomic policies have shaped the Peruvian economic model, intensified in the 90s. To 270 kilometers to the northeast of that capital and to more than 400 kilometers of road and highway, in the south of the zone of the Alley of Conchucos, department of Ancash that had a year before his action by Alice in Lima, the extractive activity of Antamina had begun. An enormous polymetallic deposit whose concession was acquired in 1996 by a Canadian private consortium. A paradigmatic example of the so-called new mining made possible by the opening to foreign investment, and until then, the largest in the history of mining in Peru, whose accumulated date of 5,000 millions. The exploitation of the world's largest combined copper zinc reserve removes 350,000 tons of mineral that is dismantled daily to process the 559 million mineral reserves initially calculated. Prior to the beginning of this commercial activity in the mineral, in the almost 5 years that it took its construction, starting in 1998, and the mina proceeded to drain a natural lake of 32 hectares and reduce by more than 300 meters the height, a change of rocky mountain peaks to proceed with the cleaning, removal to so-called sterile material of 110 million tons by detonations that reduce the solid rock to smaller blocks and grade. By cutting an open main pit that measures 1 by 2 kilometers in area and deep greater than 500 meters spending every year. This description does not point to a comparative analysis. Even beyond this specific case, the colossal transformation of the landscape carried out by indiscriminate filling, large mining or illegal mining, opening in large areas of several departments in Peru, has redoubled the irreversible passage of climate change, have been the engine of the battles that have produced the contamination of affluent waters of rivers and air, as well as erosion, soil contamination, voluntarily or involuntarily, is so-called collateral damage. Triggering displacement of peasant families, as well as a high rate of social conflicts in the country by recent decades. Today, in Peru, of the nearly 200 registered conflicts between active and latent, 70% are social-environmental. The image is emblematic. On one hand, an art action proposal carries a marginal dune in Lima to shape a social sector inside that slowly dominates and inoculates the idea of empowerment from desire. I'm talking about this. On the other hand, the greatest promoter of the Peruvian economy makes them disappear. And the enormous and drastic alteration of environment sustained by speeches in the name of the wealth, science, or material or immaterial progress of the world of humanity does not necessarily imply a problem, only awakens of unfaithfully potentiates proportional to the acceleration and assumed route or direction. The benefits of companies and to a much lesser extent of society placed in counterbalance to the unforeseen consequence of removing or even shelving mountains with a specific purpose of exporting renewable resources, whose extraction process it does not always allow the time of regeneration of those others, supposedly renewable, which primarily requires life on the planet. At the beginning of the first century, this is logos of Peru, you know, the mark Peru, Peru brand as a brand official, and the other is a caricature, cartoon from the newspaper at the same time, you know. At the beginning of the 20th century, main platform began to include action art proposals, events that emphasize their reception, giving greater visibility of this emerging scene. Among them, the exhibition Terreno de Experiencia 1, and the other is White Cube Flexi Time, made in 2000 and 2004, both in the Salary Miro Quesada Garden. Jorge Villacorta, as critic and curator, was involved in both events. He had quickly become, in the second half of the 90s, one of the most visible representatives of the transformation of the scene characterized by the late but effective institutional consolidation of the contemporary, which happened to become the axis of artistic production, increasing the receptive interest of the public. More than an exhibition, these projects left the place open to intervention or occupation by several site-specific proposals, which consecutively and continuously altered and dynamized the operation of the room throughout the event during the weeks when it was opened. August 2003, Alfredo Covarrubias, a Geronim of the artist Alberto Casari, exhibits his solo show in a gallery directed by Villacorta that includes the action of transporting the critic from his home to the gallery wrapped in a carpet where he remains for more than 4 hours. The carpet is then displayed as a piece in the space. There are two images. When it is unwrapped and appears visible and previously hatched description. And description is, in this carpet was wrapped in 2003, the critic of art, Jorge Villacorta. Like a show of Turing of sacred mantle in a time devoid of sacredness. The message and support of the message is presented as a simultaneous signaling, produced before reaction for an experience on which the reader, spectator's gaze is pulled, and its surface was a postmodern recipient for the cult of in any case, the admiration of the guide of real or imaginary influence exerted by the figure of a critic and curator, speaking in generic but also specific terms within the art system. It is curious to see that the following year in the exhibition RiAP Flexitime, several artists will also work in the physical presence of the critic, such as the proposal of Enrique Mallorca and José Carlos Martinat. One of them, Epicentro, with these images, moves furniture and personal belongings from his house and places in a chair in front of the desk and personal computer to keep it writing while each pressing keys makes a bass sound as a musical instrument. And another action called Protected Queue, proposed by the same artist within the same event, interrupted for some hours the access to the room with a pile of speakers, enclosing it inside the room and allowing only to hear his voice. The closet activated by sensors that amplify, making the speakers buzz when someone approached the closet threshold of the room. None of these cases, however, was an aggressive stance. Villacorta was rather an accomplice who inspired an esteem and affability that did not allow this proposal to be read as an act of institutional criticism that placed fictions against his person, the art scene, or towards a broader political cultural field. The following year, February 2005, as the inaugural act of his solo exhibition in the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, entitled Universal Exposition 1, J. Castro, who had abandoned his career as a diplomat in institutions such as the United Nations and European Union to dedicate himself to art, dressed in overalls in the middle of the image, identifying himself as the mostly non-white working class in Paris, did not pay for abstract access as such as Mallorca, Martinez in the Lima exhibition previously commented, but interposed an unthinkable filter and radically opposed the modalities of exclusion that in practice operate strongly in a deep-rooted institutional mentality, both in the social, political, and world economy, as well in the local culture. It declared the opening to its sample with the title of the action, Discrimination Day. and receive the public by installing an access system similar to the ones that have at retention spaces in airports, are through making it aggressive and extreme explicitly through one for once in an inverse way, in the words of the artist. Since it placed two narrow watch doors dividing people between white and others. The later, anyone with non-native European features had immediately access, while others, the majority of attendees, were subjected to a scrutiny under that subscription with which Europe and other countries that are assumed as a place par excellence of civic dignity manage their main margins, illegalizing or criminalizing the foreigner, particularly indicated by his apparent skin color or descent. Between July 2005 and March 2007, Diana Daf Collazos, this is another image of the Hotel Castro action I described. Diana Daf Collazos exhibits various records of the confrontation of the real and personal experience that unsuccessful months in which the artist was looking for a job before graduating from the specialty of performing arts of the Faculty of Science and Arts in Communication of the University. And in her proposal entitled Diana Unemployed, Collazos records a series of photographs in her activities as well as a telephone call sustained during her process. The germinal function of the stage act collided with life and at an extreme level, in which the scenes were just a kind of reverberation of an experience assumed individually as a ritual, week after week. Reviewing the section of employment offered in the newspaper, making a selection of putting together in an agenda and with previously arranged appointments, the action thus marked a social portrait of his via crucis, in which the ambitious of working within their own especially quickly declined, and interviews were coordinated for receptionists, hostess, or kinesiologists, thus proving a disheartening routine in which informality, exploitation, and the advertised scams were a percentage higher than the few vacancies for decently offered jobs. The stage act open to permanent interaction with the public became here the transposition of her experience in fragments that added to the unreached goals, as well as to the desire to do the work, considering the artistic vocation there committed. A sort of personal proposition more aligned with the individual level of expectations and the varied ideas of success or realization. In 2007, I'm talking especially because in 2007, Collazos and others, young creators in that time, created the Galpón Espacio, a project that is maintained today by some of its initial members. From there to the impulse of several years, including meeting held the so-called experiencias de la carne, experiences of flesh, from 2011 to 2015 with 4 editions. Among these creators of their own work with or without platforms, meeting and even without deliberately calling the public to it, Christian Luna made a considerable number of actions since the end of the 90s. His preference was to take urban space from different cities and carving them as stems, the precariousness, resources, or waste, human and ecological, collective or participative activation, social or symbolic violence, as well as elements of popular culture. In 2005, this is the images I'm commenting, within the new organized by law, other space, very important to talk about about the scene of the performance in the times. Luna performance is actually mummies, cardboard sleepings, moving through the streets of downtown in Lima in the evening hours, carrying recycled corrugated cardboard boxes collected from the street, sewing them with witch and needle, with the support of a team of people involved in the project. The set of sleeping bags that were given to people who were staying overnight in the streets and squares in the city center. Developed on 2 occasions in the same year, the proposal referred to the idea of an indigenous pre-Hispanic package moved to a shelter of the urban and mestizo indigenous conditions, producing an act of economy in the sense of optimal use of scarce resources, and encouraging in his own words human architectures according to ambulatory needs. And this is other images about Lalo Quigos. This is some flyer, the library, talking about the action I'm going to comment. Organizing one of the action of interventions in those same streets in the historical center entitled For Sale or Rent. Advertising the shares in a real company with the acronym CPA, pronounced in Spanish at least as the word it falls. He legally obtained permission to transport on foot a set of rigid panels on a route also rigid then. And even more so now, that led them to the School of Art where he studied, that he permitted holders ignored was that in the 29, I think, modular surfaces of wood and wheels, each carried as a banner a single letter that in the organized allows reading the phrase, "This property is for sale or rent." Text of similar postal places offer any bidder property. Thus, the rule was paneled stops as taking a break in front of the facades of the Palace of Justice, like these images, of the Congress of the Republic, and all the government palace. As an immer sign offered the properties for purchase or rent, while on the way the group registered interviews with testimonies and contradictory opinions of passersby about the possibility of this offer. The comment is aimed at confronting a privatization of all public enterprises and natural resources. The comment, which contributes to erode the notion of the public, produced from those same spaces that led the country and that in a certain way generate lower esteem, identification or belonging. 2002, Janine Sones opened an exhibition entitled The Invariable Enthusiasm of Sisyphus, that makes the theme of a Greek myth as a metaphor of the contemporary everyday condition. Her exhibition includes installation, objects, video performance, and performances. Her proposal stands to include a strong conceptual component and also absurd or humor. In this video action entitled The Salt, 2 people, man and woman, are facing each other, sitting naked and covering each one with their own arms. In the middle, a dish of some threads with a cluster of salt is suspended. With the powder, they took turns blowing salt on the other. There, in this more or less obvious word games, salt as a word also of salary speaks of economy and exchange transport to the field of affective relationship, to coexistence, and even to the other. Janine was also recently curator of a returning exhibition of a key artist in the scene of the second half of the 19th in Lima, which returned to exhibit after a recess of a decade and a half. It's too many times. One of the pieces presented in this exhibition was entitled Pachachaki, or Code for Centipedes, in an Andean pampa known as the Mirador Capachanca, a few kilometers from the Coricancha Lake, and carrying a single garment of 50 people, sweaters in long sleeves or open sleeves, and woven to 45 successive closer bags behind. Relatives and members of the Bison community in Patabamba who went from descriptively in the project of the endorsement of what that became a shared dream, move like a gigant centipede that borders one side of the lake, and also forms a human spiral almost umbilical, which unravels, then moving on a tangent, initially true of as a collective bag of stem and made of sheep wool to reinforce the pastoral image, say the artist. The image of this huge yellow or perhaps golden anthropod moves near the large mirror or groundwater that could be in a few years occupied by a real estate speculation affecting the natural landscape that looks toward the sacred valley of Cusco, very close to the Machu Picchu. It is also an image of coercion and integrates as a single body a population already naturally united and overflowing with generosity, joy and fraternity both among them and with their visitors. As the link between the images of the action of Villanes and Salazar that I chose to deem as a diptych of the principle of this speech, in the line of around 500 people carrying small mounds of sand in their place around the dune of Alice in these images, with the row of almost 30 people carrying panels of black letters on yellow through the streets of Lima in Quiroz case, to the line of 50 shelters of Patabamba united by that unique sack also of intensive yellow. Several of these actions carry in their own those elements of hope and confrontation, from poetic of shock and almost ritual bias, betting on their way for the collective truth as a single body and at the same time metaphor. I have a question. How many time I have still?
10 minutes or so.
In light that happening with the scene of continuous protests at the end of the 90s, nowadays a repression has intensified that makes the main square in the center of Lima as a space inaccessible to political demonstration today. This managed to only locate alternative in another central square in the city, the Plaza San Martin. It's curious that even so, protests have been the most visible scenario for action art, and within it, one of the most sensitive fields of the bodies and ecosystems damage. In this act of visibility of the crimes committed against LGBTB population, and just their days before the 2006 presidential elections and the imminent closure of the political campaigns of the parties in dispute, the proposal deloyed at the initiative of Giuseppe Campuzano, this image, with the collaboration of several other people, considering the exhibiting of a series of posters disseminating in full streets new and information about vejations, persecutions and crimes committed against travestis or homosexuals in the country. Thus, in the time of heavy night traffic, these posters held of the participants' own bodies partially covered a a large wall where at that time the municipality of the district has displayed in large printed images an absolute photographic homage to the neighborhood of the district, in the walls of Cambusan. In contrast, these posters have been part of an archive to press clippings about the persecution of travestism that the artist had been exhibiting in different spaces since 2004. And this is a comment about a book he wrote, a very important book called the Museo Travesti, a history about the travestis in Peru since the early times and even pre-Hispanic times, passing for the conquest and the Republic times. And also this is the exhibition he is making usually about this book in exhibitions in different places. This was in Medellin 2 or 3 years ago. Well, Luisa Fernanda Lindo, artist, just 3 pages. Okay. Luisa Fernanda Lindo, artist, poet, play, writing performance in 2000. I think I'm going to change this to. But without sound, yes? Okay. Performs in 2010 one of the most literally demolishing actions of impact and emotional resistance goes against the stereotype of a woman linked to fragility. Under the title of Sublime, the Sublime, the artist spears among the audience in an environmental of La Ex Culpable, with her hair tied back, dressed of a nurse, while in one-piece short shirt and sleeves, and wearing protective glasses and gloves. She holds in her hands a steel mallet with which she repeatedly strikes an unfinished brick and cement and wall that had been gotten up earlier in the middle of the room. A wall that, without compromising any structure of the building, was about to be removed. It takes advantage of being demolished to try to intrude in down, confronting in a reducing, in a single restraining and irrepressible act of impulsive and rhythmic energy that also resists in our exhaustion. The action is part of a presentation of her poem, Simulacrum, and displays the urgency of face to an imminent and destructive debacle. In addition to the dry blows and the noise of the rubble of the wall when falling off and falling to the ground, in the space you hear only the audio of the reading that she previously made in a megaphone of her poem, included in the published book. Hundreds of words written without capital letters or punctuation as an affront to fear of anger between recklessness, disappointment, and screaming. And the last one. I'm going to not comment this. I think 2 years ago I talked about this also. And this is a very important action. I can resume this way. These are protesters. The name of the group is No Without Our Permission. And the action is 2011. It had to do with cases, an specific case. 6 women linked to the arts and sociology: Carol Fernandez, Carla Montalvo, who was here 2 years ago, Ana Lucia Rivero, Silvana Solórzano, Alejandra Chavez, and Inés Jauregui walked next to the march wearing shirts shirts typical of the high Andean area of Peru and the other parts of Latin America, and in a certain moment they raise their skins to show a graphic representation of their ovaries that covers the genital area, including her red spots that allude to the blood that has been fixed following drums their legs. While there should energically group of phrases. My body is not your battlefield, not without my permission. Fujimori, never again. Enforced sterilizations, never again. And they are talking about the enforced sterilization committed by the government of Fujimori in too many thousands of women in some years, no? Without permission, of course. And then this is another action linked with that idea, but adding the other, you can say, other subjects as the laws in favor to the abortion, you know, and other how to say, I'm going to put this because I think it's later, no? I'm going to just comment on that. So, Nicole Hooligan. In February 2014, Nicole Hooligan placed in the exhibition called Halls of the Lima Art Museum Mali, which compiles images of pieces produced in Latin America during the convulsive decade of the 80s under repressive or dictatorial context, entitled Losing the Human Shape. I was involved in that exhibition also. The extended register in key proposals, which then had a marginal character of were censored for their implosion of affront or confrontation, constitute an appreciable data of the opinion of the a museographic critical perspective led the words and the documents exposed in a gesture of indifference to the context, similar to that is experienced today in that same region, and particularly in Peru. Separating the exhibition from the battles of the present. On the closing day of the exhibition, the artist enters in a room with a make-up in the cosmetically copies the facial painting in the meme Jorge Acuña, who questioned the public in the streets of Lima at the end of the 60s. She goes slowly, taking off her clothes to show some inscriptions on her body, taken of the uninformed of Ombudsman office issued in January that year on social conflicts in the country, mostly social environmental. She barged into the halls of the museum, full of spectators, with the number of the reports indicated on the neck and the numbers of conflicts registered in the belly and back. Encouraged the public to continue descriptions on her body, placing the names of the departments of the country and the numbers of conflicts registered in each of them. Nicole through the several affirmations and questioning, searching her interlocutors for an interpellation dialogue. Do you, as citizens, are interested? Are you moved by being active agents of change? How do they feel about the situation? I'm quotation, the artist. How do they feel about the situation we are experiencing? Maybe 20 years from now, we can have an exhibition like this dedicated to what is happening here on the relation of what we are living now. Do you think it is the role of the museum to do something actual, or is not necessary? In a museum, do you find history from the past or from the present? Do you think that the Art Museum of Lima is interested in social conflicts? Her action is a call to protest, to think of an expanded social body that includes natural and interculturality. She lights a holy stick and spread coca leaves along the walls of the rooms and as an offering, an act of a healer of the curator outline. Naked leaves the museum by placing a laptop of her on her head like a poster, like this. On To's screen, it leaves visible an images in which Jorge Acuña, these images in the screen of the computer, Jorge Acuña, in a square of Lima, almost 50 years ago, carries a blackboard with the phrase by Jorge Carlos Mariátegui on the ideology in the field of culture. The phrase says, the upper middle class wants an art piece from the artist that courts and flatters their mediocre taste. Well, that's all. Thank you very much for the attention.